You're listening to the Career Plus Life Catch-Up, episode number 61. Welcome to the Career Plus Life Catch-Up, a show anchored in reality to help you create a balanced life where you enjoy both your work and your life, because you don't have to choose. I'm your host, Cecile Ferry, a corporate executive turned coach and working mom. This is your place for insights, advice, and tools to optimize your career direction, balance, and confidence. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into it. Hello, my beautiful people. How are you doing this week? I hope you're keeping well, and I hope my voice is going to hang on for the rest of this podcast. I am doing well now. I've been recovering from COVID for a couple of weeks, and it is still having a little hang over me, and it's forcing me to have to manage my energy towards the end of the day. And with what I put on and what I take on during my days, it's been a bit of a challenge for a high achiever like me, but I'm getting there. So I have an exciting episode for you today. I wanted to talk about fears. I know, doesn't sound that exciting, but what is exciting is I want to help you grasp your fears differently and understand them and change your relationships with them. And to me, that is life-changing. Fears, we all have them. And to be honest, having fears is partially healthy. We do want to be afraid of a number of things that could potentially happen to us. But when it's not so healthy, it's when the fears make us go around in circles and keeping us stuck in usually a pretty unhappy situation. So I help my clients a lot with their fears. Like, it comes up all the time in all our sessions, because if they knew how to handle them and if they knew how to do that by themselves, they wouldn't need coaching in the first place. Everyone would just get on with their life and do what they actually want to do. Coaching is a great tool to help you see where the fears are getting the better of you and understanding how you can overcome it. And I get coached myself in my own fears. So what I'm going to give you today is kind of some light coaching tools so you can start coaching yourself on some of those fears. But then if you feel you need deeper support, definitely one-on-one coaching will change that for you for good. I don't think the goal is to be fearless. I see people throwing that word, and I don't think it's helpful. And I don't think we actually want to or can remove the fear. It's just not possible. But to me, the goal is to be aware of our fears. So maybe just listening to today's episode, you will realize you've got some fears in some parts of your life. Because fears just tend to be really sneaky and just hide under the rock. They're not like waving a giant flag with their name over it. You just kind of act a certain way, or you have certain feelings and you don't know what's sitting under there is fear. So first, the goal is to be aware of them. And then second, for me, is to understand them, to kind of make a bit of a friend, to kind of hang around with them and get to know them. And then finally, to learn to live with them and not let them stop us and stop our growth. Fears exist all the time, and new fears come up every single time we change something in our life. Like you probably would have noticed. You want to change jobs, you have fears about that. You get into the new job, you have new fears about your performance in the role, right? And so on. So fear is part of our nature, and it's because we have an ego side to us, an inner critic who doesn't like change. I invite you, if you haven't listened to episode number 4 on the inner critic, to listen to that one after today, because it really goes well into further details and I can't here. But the inner critic's job is to protect ourselves, often at the expense of our actual happiness. I just want you to know, I just wanted to cover that really briefly, but just know that we are neurologically programmed with that mechanism. So we can't shut it down. There's nothing wrong with you. You're actually functioning perfectly well if you have all sorts of fears on a daily basis. But what is happening is this program, this mechanism, is not operating optimally, because the world around us has evolved so much and so fast but our brain hasn't evolved at the same pace. Dr. Libby talks a lot about that. And therefore, our brain and our ego and inner critic see a lot of fears or perceives a lot of fears that are not real. And that puts us quite often in a chronic state of fear in our modern lives. So that's a fact. Like, we have a heightened perception of fear these days than people had, let's say, 50 or 80 years ago. Things like emails beeping, or social media, or technology not working, or having those jam-packed schedules, doing all those bits and pieces everywhere, having jobs that are volatile. Like, all of those things didn't exist back in the day. So of course they are really coming and triggering our amygdala and generating a lot more of those fears. But today I want to specifically, rather than I'll be here for an hour talking about all those kind of fears more generally, I want to handpick a couple of fears that you may have right now in your career or in your life. These are fears that keep you stuck, make you ruminate in the background, and hold you back from experiencing a higher stage of happiness and enjoyment. And that's what excites me, because on the other side of those fears, if you can learn to overcome them, you will find more bliss and more happiness. So today I'm going to focus on 3 key fears. I'm going to talk about the fear of failure, the fear of loss, and the fear of judgment, because I see these as being the biggest one in my work. And for each, I'm going to talk about how does this manifest, how does it look like. Then we're going to unpack what's sitting under that. And then I will leave you with a concrete way around those fears so you can be more confident and you know how to not be stuck if it happens to you. Are you ready? Let's get into it. Okay, fear number 1 is the fear of failure. I'm starting with this one as it's a big one, and I have it massively. So it's very therapeutic as well for me to record this episode on it. So what it looks like, multiple forms, but typically not going for new opportunities or for things because we don't know if we will do well or succeed. It looks like staying in the same safe lane, or not choosing a direction because we may have a chance to fail. So typically we'll be looking at finding guarantees and controls and checks in place and doing everything we can to ensure we do not fail. So typically it's that gripping kind of energy. Or more subtle ways will be to be picking multiple things to get involved with so that we don't have to choose one and risk really failing there. That was one of mine back in the days. Or we might be hiding under or behind someone else, just so that if something doesn't work out, it doesn't look like it's us. And also this fear of failure can actually come up as a fear of the unknown. So there is uncertainty, and I could talk just about that. But I think what's sitting under that is we think the unknown might turn into some kind of a failure. So a lot of us have that. And I also have to mention here the twin sister of this fear, which is perfectionism. The two go hand in hand, because when you have fear of failure, you do have perfectionism because you see perfectionism as a way to not fail. So I'm going to read you a quote from Elizabeth Gilbert from Big Magic on that, because she says it really well. She says, "I think perfectionism is just a high-end haute couture version of fear. I think perfectionism is just fear in fancy shoes and a mink coat, pretending to be elegant when actually it's just terrified. Because underneath that shiny veneer, perfectionism is nothing more than a deep existential angst that says again and again, I'm not good enough and I will never be good enough." So if we unpack that fear of failure, we will find that at the root of it, we often grew up with a mentality where the only desire and only acceptable outcome was success. And that is called a fixed mindset. I'll link the book in the show note by Carol Dweck because this is such an interesting read. A lot of us, if you grew up in the 70s and 80s, most of our parents had a fixed mindset. Kids these days get taught growth mindset at school and things are changing. But 40 years ago, things were different. I grew up with a very strong fixed mindset where it's all about getting validation and it's about success. And in a fixed mindset, the journey or your personal development and evolution doesn't matter as much as the goal. The goal is everything, and it's not about who you are being as you do it. It's you gotta hit that goal. And often what happens is love as a kid is associated with that goal and that level of success. So if you didn't hit a certain level or a goal at school or in your hobbies, then you felt less loved. So of course you fear failure because it feels like rejection when you don't hit it. It feels like being unworthy. So of course you fear failure because it feels like a rejection and you won't be able to live with yourself. And you need that validation because that's how you were conditioned to be. If you didn't need any validation in your life right now, get rid of all of that. You don't need any validation. Would you care if you failed tomorrow? Would that matter? Probably wouldn't, right? So the problem with that fear of failure, that it really grabs you at the core of your essence. You were made to think that if you don't hit a certain goal, then there is something wrong with you or that you're not lovable. That is huge, and that's what's sitting underneath. And that's something that totally resonates with me. It looks like I was a very high-achieving, very successful person, but deep down I was always afraid of not meeting that standard, of not being that. And that is not a great state to be in permanently. What to do when you have fear of failure? The main thing is you want to see failure as a painful experience. I'm not here to sugarcoat it. I'm not going to pretend. We're not going to gloss over it and say, failure is cool. No, it's painful, but it is not a threatening experience. And it doesn't define who you are, and it doesn't define your worth. You got to pull that away from who you are. Failure is just something, an event that happens to you. So you're going to split the two and look at it head on. So the steps when you are confronted with fear of failure is number one, think that it may not happen. This might just be your brain trying to warn you and to keep you safe. But statistically, not everything happens. So typical examples, I see lots of women that are afraid of failing in a different career direction. Most of the time it doesn't happen because you do get qualified if you need, or you learn on the job. So a lot of the time something appears real and it's not. So I don't know what the percentage is, but I would say at least 50 to 60% of the time, what you fear in terms of failure will never actually come true. So that's great news. Secondly, if it does happen, let's say, then think about what will you do to face it and to deal with it. And that starts with you learning how to deal with your negative emotions. How will you deal with shame? How will you deal with potential rejection? You get rejected at an exam, you get rejected at a job interview, right? That is a skill we need to learn as adults if we haven't learned it properly as a kid, because often we got told to avoid it at all costs, so we haven't built up that emotional resilience. So we need to practice. It's something that we may have avoided in our life, but it's coming at us now. And if you can be okay with those negative emotions that are just emotions, then you would have grown massively as an adult. So you need to do that work anyway. And then think about how will you deal concretely in your life if you fail in this career choice, if you fail in having this conversation. And then number 3, know that it will teach you something really valuable. And it's not me saying it. There's tons of research and thought leaders that say it as well. We don't learn unless we fail, really. We can just copy other people and be inspired by mentors, but the best learning that you've had in your life have come from things not working out the way that you wanted, right? So overall, see failure as an event in your life that you learn from and grow from, and not a negative thing to avoid. You know, it's the fact that you're just trying to throw failure in the back corner and run in the opposite direction. That is the behavior and the perception that you want to change. because failure is going to be in your life anyway. And you will grow so much more as a human being if you learn to accept that, to be okay with your emotions at the time, and to learn a few things. I know it's not easy when you spend years and years doing everything in your life not to fail. So give yourself some grace there and just go through those steps again and realize it may not happen. And if it happens, what will you do? And then what would you learn from it? And also something really important to do is you do that. On the other hand, if you are a perfectionist, is to work on curbing your perfectionism. And that goes through lowering those standards and accepting things to be B- instead of A+. I've done amazing work in that space. I can definitely help you. Okay, let's move on to the second fear, which is the fear of loss. I often see this with women who are usually in pretty good, stable jobs, a stage of their life where they have a lot of comfort, a lot of things that support themselves financially, materially. So they have a good job, they earn good money, they have good perks. You know, not everyone is there, but usually, you know, when we get to mid-level in our life, we have built a lot of stages for ourselves. We've built some material comfort and we get attached to it, and we can get really hung up on that safety net because we make it mean it is our safety. So much so that we would rather maintain or avoid losing something rather than gaining something new and something better. It's a well-known cognitive bias. So this manifests in avoiding career changes, not living an unhappy relationship, not wanting to move places or to let go of certain habits or to potentially lose a certain status. That definitely happened to me when I was in my corporate job and I was looking at a career change, and I was so afraid to lose my title, my status, the level of income, the company car that I had, and all the lifestyle that was linked to that, right? So if we unpack that fear of loss, we will find that there is a false belief sitting underneath that those material things, those external things, carry us in life and define us, that they are necessary props. We give them a really important role. And we think that without them, we will lose our essence, we will lose our worth, and we will feel totally lost to the point that we feel our existence is just gonna be difficult. Or it could be also that we have had personal experiences where everything was pulled from under us suddenly when we were younger, when basically we didn't have the emotional tools to deal with that. Or it could be that we witness people who struggle, who went through phases where they lost a lot of things or they lost everything. Or we saw people especially struggling financially. It could be our parents losing their jobs, losing their income. And that happened to me as well. Several times my dad lost his job and we had to move very quickly from one city to another. So what happens then in those situations when we witness that as a kid, our subconscious programs us to be aware of that and to never let it happen to us. And that is quite deep, and we might not realize we even have that. But look back in your history, in your family history, or when you grew up. Have you been through some of those stages maybe of loss? And then chances are you've really learned a key lesson for yourself there, and you are hanging on to things because you don't want that to happen to you. So you typically grab cushions to always have enough and to have security. So that's why I was afraid of leaving my corporate job with not having money. It's because I saw my dad moving, getting the whole family from one city to another. And a couple of months later, he lost his job after his probation period. And so it happened many times. So it can be all the way to some level of trauma, financial trauma for kids to see that. So see if there's something in your childhood, or it could simply be that you're really attached and latching on all the things that you have to the point that they merge with your identity. And of course, then you don't want to let them go and you think you won't be okay without them. So the way around that fear of loss is to, number one, understand our conditioning around what we have. Our conditioning around money, around success, around status, around the things that we have, all the way to a job title, all the material things, like what are all the beliefs and projections that we have inherited and that we stand by, and what we link them to in terms of our being. And number two, it is to separate the stuff, I call it the stuff, from our identity. And we need to understand that. We need to feel like those things complete us, but they are not us. And therefore, because us, we can never lose that. You can never lose who you are, your strength, your gift, your skills, your own way of looking at the world, your own personality, your character traits, like all of that makes you is your essence and your unique kind of fingerprint. And that is completely separate from all the external things you can bring into your life. Number three is to be comfortable with emptiness. So that is pretty hard because we don't live in a world that preaches that. We live in a world that says, fill up on things, have more. You need all of those things to feel happy. This is the other way around. Actually quite aligns with Buddhist philosophies. It's about you don't need all of that. And in order to know is you've got to practice having less. And I'm not saying sell off everything, declutter everything, but practice in your mind being in the place that you don't need those things to feel yourself. So often mindfulness is a great practice for that, or meditation, where you're just comfortable with your breath or with just being and not having things, consuming things, experiencing things. So if you have the fear of loss, I really encourage you to develop a practice that works for you, where you have some form of emptiness in your life and you realize that you're okay. So you physically, mentally need to go there. And then number 4 is to believe in the ebbs and flows of life. So everything is always evolving and becoming. It's not just me saying it. You can find lots of thinkers that say it too. Everything is rising and falling constantly. We are constantly evolving as human beings. Have you noticed? Yeah, your life is always that way. So there is no permanence. And look for evidence of that flow of life in your own life experience so far. Look at when you lost job and then you got new jobs and then you had a break and then something changed and then what came out of it and what got rebuilt and then what came tumbling down and what came out of that. Like we all have a very rich tapestry in our lives that is made of those ebbs and flows. And that is why I can stand here now, not having that fear of loss, because I trust that things will get transformed and will evolve and come back another way. And that has been my experience. When I changed career, I lost a lot of my status and I lost some income. Absolutely. I lost part of my lifestyle for a while, but everything was channeled back into new energy and I regrew new things, new shoots that were so much stronger and more enjoyable for me. And everything came back into my life, the lifestyle and the income. Plus, I had all the enjoyment, the fulfillment, and the personal growth that came with it. So you're always going to get more. Don't think that if you lose something, you're going to go backwards. I don't think in life we ever go backwards. So temporary, some things will shift in and out of your life, but just trust that it will always keep regrowing. That has been my experience, and that has been the experience of all my clients. So understand that holding on to something for dear life is actually quite pointless, and it's just resistance, and we will get swept up anyway. Look at the pandemic. We've all experienced loss, right? And I think it was such a good lesson in the fact that there is nothing permanent. So just know life is about losses and gains. So if you approach life that way, you will be fine next time you have fear of loss. And my third and last fear for today is the fear of judgment. So, i.e., what other people think. It manifests a lot of ways, like not speaking up, not taking action, not doing the project, not launching the business, not writing the book, staying invisible, saying you don't know, you don't have an opinion, adjusting your behavior all the time based on what you think other people are going to think or expect, or typically people pleasing, or letting others be the owner of the work or the project, or be the messenger so you can just take a back step, using emails rather than a conversation, keeping toxic people in your life, not going for what you want because it's not the mainstream, it's not socially acceptable, or there are cultural norms around it that it's not a job for women, or it's not a rewarding job, it doesn't pay well, all those things. It's like letting all the outside norms and belief and noise dictate what you do. And that's also linked to the fear of failure, because you think that if you fail, then you're going to be judged as well. So that is a massive one in our life, and it keeps growing, to be honest, because of social media. Nobody ever puts anything remotely negative on there. Like, you have to show, because you'll be judged on social media. That is a fear that everybody has today, and it comes up a lot in my conversation with clients when it comes to career coaching, and when it comes to life coaching as well. So many of our choices are made with others' judgment in mind. So if we unpack that, in my experience, it means that we have had a lot, or at least a significant load of unsolicited feedback or opinions that have affected us, that have most likely offended us or hurt us, that have had an impact on us, that they have changed our belief about ourselves. Basically, we've had people criticizing what we said or what we did, and we felt like if we showed who we were, if we were being ourselves completely naturally and vulnerably, then people might not like it, and they might tell us off, or it might just be perceived negatively. So we learned that being ourselves is not okay, and there's a potential risk of being rejected by other people. Typically, feedback from teachers, or even early learning prior to that, feedback from parents, from adult relatives, or friends may have rocked us at our core. So again, that's just a subconscious reaction we've learned. It's best not to share, it's best not to shine too bright. It's safer to stay small and hidden. And basically, we've learned the world isn't a safe place in judging. Like, you get judged and you get shut down. And with social media, like, the world feels even less like a safe place. Also, another aspect that's sitting there with the fear of judgment is we have a conditioning from our culture that our lives should always be glossy and perfect and amazing. In other words, you can't show challenges, you can't show imperfections. So you would lose your rank in the social pecking order, right? Because that is the projection. To be completely honest, there is today, it's changing, but there is still a really huge lack in our world of acceptance and authenticity and diversity and inclusion in our society. People who are different still get attacked. They get picked on, they get cornered, they get singled out. Like, people were really lacking a lot of those skills of inclusion, of seeing that we are one society, that we are all different, and we're all part of the same world. So nothing we can do there. Society and the culture are evolving gradually with progresses in society. But there is that underlying mentality that we should all be the same and we should all fit the mold. And unfortunately, therefore, that really breeds a lot of judgment. And our society is sick with that negative judgment about everyone's life. Have you seen how everyone's got an opinion about everything? So I think that is a big factor. The other one is your own personal stuff that you have adopted, where you feel like you need to constantly get feedback. And when you've had negative feedback, it has rocked your confidence and has just made you learn not to do it again. So how to reframe, how to change that? Number one, I'm going to be really clear here. People will judge you. Always, every day of your life, unless you live as a hermit in a mountain. So no matter what you do, people will judge you. You cannot stop that. In other words, let it happen. And even if you do nothing, people will judge. So if you take one thing from today, people are judging you right now, and they will continue by just you being in front of them. They will judge what you're wearing, what you're saying, how you sound, like all of that. And that just gives me so much peace the day I heard that, like people will judge no matter what. You cannot prevent that. And they're judging you right now. You're judging me. That's fine. So first of all, I just know this is completely outside of your control. Number two, know that their judgment isn't a reflection on you. Rather, it's a reflection on them and their opinions and their belief system. I'm going to quote here the book by Don Miguel Ruiz. It's called The 4 Agreements. I will link it in the show notes. His second agreement is don't take anything personally. And it really details that. I'm going to read you a little section of it. He says, nothing other people do is because of you. It is because of themselves. All people live in their own dream, in their own mind. They are in a completely different world from the one we live in. When we take something personally, we make the assumption that they know what is in our world, and we try to impose our world on their world. Even when a situation seems so personal, even if others insult you directly, it has nothing to do with you. What they say, what they do, and the opinions they give are according to the agreements they have in their own minds. There you go. If you want, read more about that. It's a very quick, easy little book to read. So that's number two, is knowing it comes from them. And therefore, if you ever want judgment, because we need some constructive judgment, be really careful who you ask. So if you're writing a book, get feedback, only listen to the judgment of other writers. And specifically writers that are in your field, in the genre that you write, that are successful. Same if you get feedback about your career, see who you get it from. So only allow the very specialized people that are reliable, that can be trusted in that space, that don't have vested interest in giving you their judgment. Number three, you got to learn to detach from judgment, either positive or negative, and get to that place where whether you get compliments, whether you get praise, you get encouragement, the positive, or you get criticized or you get naysayers that say it's not going to work and I can't see you doing that. Doesn't matter. You don't need either. You don't need validation. You know what you are and who you are. So see, quite often we quite like all the positive judgment and we get a bit hooked onto that in order to keep going. And then the negative judgment stops us. If you can get to a place where you don't need either, you're neutral no matter what. So you don't get swayed too much by the positive and you don't let the negative bring you down, then you're winning, my friend. And you don't have that fear of judgment. And just always go back to you. I know it's a really big deal, but I find with age and with experience, I really get to that place where I have less and less fear and care for other judgment. For instance, I do this podcast, I put it out there, and that is all. I do not think once about what are people going to think about what I've just said today. So I hope you can start practicing those tools. No, people will judge anyway, and it's about themselves, and you don't actually need that. You are fine on your own. You know enough who you are and what you bring. There you go, my friends. I'm going to stop here because there are plenty more fears we could talk about, but I wanted to give you the 3 main ones. So fear of failure, fear of loss, and fear of judgment are all companions on our life journeys, but I've given you the tools to unpack those, to understand them, so that, you don't have that resistance to them and that yucky feeling and you suppress those feelings. You get to look at them because they're part of you and there's a reason why you feel them. I've given you strategies to shift your mindset around those things so you can start getting on your way and not let those fears stop you from taking action and having the Career Plus life that you really deserve and that you deeply want. And of course, if you want to go and take this further, if you want to talk about your particular fears, if you want to deep dive and really pull it apart and put things in place in your life at a mindset level and concrete actions so that things change for you forever in that space of your life, you're ready for one-on-one coaching. And I can absolutely help you shift those fears in only a couple of sessions. So if that speaks to you, you can go and visit my website at careercatchup.com and you can browse my career coaching or my life coaching offers, which will help you putting that fear on the passenger seat, understand it and shoot straight past it and really focus on your goal, get re-energized there and making massive progress. So that's what I wish for you this week, next month. And please never give up. Never let your fears stop the beautiful you and the amazing potential that's sitting right there. Have a beautiful week. I will speak with you soon. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to find out more information, you can visit my website at careercatchup.com. There you will find blog articles, free resources, a self-study course for your career direction and ways to work with me. It's at careercatchup.com. I hope to continue to connect with you and support you. Talk to you soon.